Hey, welcome to Book Sandwich Inn. My name's Rory Martorana. I'm an adult services librarian here at the New Haven Free Public Library. Today I'm joined by author Rae Nudson. Rae is a writer specializing in nonfiction essays and reported features on beauty, fashion, and pop culture. Her works appeared in Esquire, The Cut, Hazlitt, Medium, and more. She's got a bachelor's degree in journalism and history with a specialization in American history from the University of Missouri. And she's zooming in from Chicago to discuss her new book, All Made Up: The Power and Pitfalls of Beauty Culture from Cleopatra to Kim Kardashian. Thank you so much, Rae, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
We can just jump right in. I know that you had a reading prepared, so would you like to set that up for us and jump right in?
Sure. So I'm going to be reading from the chapter called Powerful, which kind of discusses women in power and leadership positions and how makeup kind of affects their lives and how they use makeup to get that power. Okay. Keeping up with conventions has always had dangerous consequences, especially for those who can't fit into them. Standards of beauty change depending on the culture and the time period, but they tend to be based on and set by the group of people in power. This leaves the poor and underrepresented, who face graver consequences for not fitting in, out of the beauty ideal. There were Black men and women at the royal courts of Henry VII, Henry VIII, Elizabeth I, and James I, and Black men and women lived freely and participated in society in both the cities and countryside of Tudor England. There is not much information on whether Black women participated in cosmetics trends of wealthy white women like Ceruse makeup, but there are clues as to how ideas of beauty changed over this time in England to discriminate against those with darker skin. As England began to participate in the slave trade in the late 1500s, racist attitudes developed as a way to justify enslaving people with dark skin, and beauty ideals that emphasized whiteness grew more apparent at this time. Court masks were plays performed in court that glorified the monarchy. In 1605, The Mask of Blackness, written by English playwright Ben Jonson at the request of Queen Anne of Denmark, told the story of Ethiopian nymphs who were brought to England. White women at the court, including Anne, used blackface makeup on their skin to act in the play and tell the story of nymphs who became worried their dark skin was no longer beautiful. The nymphs were sent away from court so their skin could be turned from black to white. In a sequel, The Mask of Beauty, the nymphs, now white, were brought back to England having been fixed. These plays lay bare racist beliefs that white skin is superior. The white monarchy and court used these plays to make a statement about what was beautiful, one that kept Black women from being considered beautiful or powerful, as whiteness was clearly required to be either. Because makeup is malleable and affordable, and because it can be washed off at the end of the day, it's a much more accessible tool to change social status than generational wealth or inheriting a title, which women throughout history were often kept from because of patriarchal laws preventing them from inheriting or holding on to property or wealth. Makeup can also transform physical features that may not align with the values of the dominant culture into features that fit into the zeitgeist, the way a beauty mark can cover up a scar. That meant that any white woman with the means to purchase or make cosmetics and a good sense of fashion trends could exploit this knowledge to gain a connection with the upper class. In the mid-1700s, two sisters used their beauty to marry into a higher class. Around 1740, Elizabeth and Maria Gunning started getting noticed for their beauty. In 1748, they were invited to a ball at Dublin Castle, but since they didn't have gowns to wear, they borrowed costumes from the local theater to literally play the part of wealthier women. Women all the time dressed the part they needed to play in society. When going to a party, women would wear makeup to emulate those in higher classes or to indicate an understanding of the formality and traditions of the event, just as women continue to do today. Demonstrating that understanding of rituals by wearing a certain type of dress to a ball, or wearing heavier makeup in the evening than in the daytime, is itself a class marker. A local earl gave Elizabeth and Maria's mother money to help them go to London, where the girls gained fame and social clout because of their beauty. Because of the social capital, the two sisters were able to marry into higher classes. Elizabeth married the Duke of Hamilton and Maria the Earl of Coventry. Maria's husband apparently didn't like her to use cosmetics, even though he married her in large part because of the conventional beauty they helped her to achieve. At one point during a dinner, people say that Earl chased her around a dining room as he tried to wipe the makeup from her face. But Maria defied him and continued to wear her makeup, demonstrating that for her, makeup was more than a tool for climbing the social ladder. It was a rare opportunity for personal agency and self expression. Like Queen Elizabeth, Maria used ceruse, and the lead in the makeup seeped into her skin. Maria died in 1760 when she was just 27, likely from lead poisoning as a result of the cosmetics she wore. At her funeral, thousands of people joined the procession, that so many people wanted to see her in death and possibly emulated her in life is a testament to the image she created and the power and status that it brought her. The Gunning sisters were influencers before the internet, using their beauty to gain status and power that they were previously locked out of. In the 21st century, images can travel faster around the world, and beauty remains a tool to gain status and power. Celebrity Kim Kardashian is an excellent modern example of how this can work. Kardashian started her career in reality TV by making appearances on The Simple Life, airing from 2003 to 2007, as a friend to Paris Hilton, who was one of the stars on the show. The following year, with the help of her family's connections and her growing publicity, resulting in part from a sex tape of her leaked without her permission, she became the star of her own reality show. In keeping up with the Kardashians, she used her beauty to help portray an affluent, aspirational lifestyle. Through her show, modeling, and acting, Kardashian gained media attention. Then, when she had an audience, she used endorsements, beauty products, and social media to increase both her reach and net worth by selling images of herself on TV and in magazines, and then selling the makeup products she used. Instead of using her beauty to marry into wealth, like the Gunning sisters, she used her looks to make her own money. Modern women who have the ability to gain financial independence don't need to rely on attracting a wealthy husband to reach a higher class. For some women, using makeup can be a way to make money by selling it, becoming a makeup artist, or modeling. Makeup can also be a way to simply gain attention or show off the appearance of wealth. Sharing makeup tips or perfecting certain makeup trends, for example, is also a form of social capital. When a woman has control over her life and finances, she also has control over the way she looks, the money she makes and spends, and the makeup she uses. Instead of depending on men in her life to attain the rewards for her beauty, she reaps them for herself. Kardashian used a method of makeup application called contouring, often used in theater to shade and lighten the skin to emphasize certain features. Like chiaroscuro in art, this play of light and shadow helps sculpt the face using makeup instead of a scalpel. In theater, it can help the audience see actors' emotions when the stage is far away. Kardashian's makeup helped highlight certain features on her face. She used contouring to make her cheekbones and jawline look sharper, her forehead appear smaller, and her nose seem thinner and shorter. She uses concealer to make her under eye area appear bright, getting rid of any dark circles and helping to lighten and raise the cheekbone. She also uses this shading to help make her lips appear fuller and thicker. The face she has created spawned a lucrative business to help others get her look, placing Kardashian at the peak. Gia Tolentino wrote for The New Yorker about the ubiquitous beauty trends in the 2010s that are in part based on the look Kardashian made popular. She quoted plastic surgeon Jason Diamond. "I'd say that 30% of people come in bringing a photo of Kim or someone like Kim. There's a handful of people, but she's at the very top of the list, and understandably so." Kardashian capitalized on already existing beauty standards and repackaged them as something attainable for a regular person, if only they used contour makeup or went to the plastic surgeon too. Women who don't have the physical characteristics their culture deems stylish can use cosmetics and grooming to fit in instead. Like Kardashian's contouring illustrates, if a forehead is too big, makeup can make it look smaller. Lips can be made redder with lipstick, and powder can change the color of a face. Plastic surgery can actually change facial structure, and modern cosmetic procedures like Botox can be even easier on the body than surgery. Makeup and cosmetic procedures can also emphasize that a woman has money and time to spend, and the prized knowledge of what is trendy. And time, money, and knowledge are essentially all that status encompasses. Queen Elizabeth and Kim Kardashian illustrate that in sexist societies, women not only have to understand cultural implications of cosmetics, but must also be able to manipulate them to gain power they are not automatically granted. A woman's worth is so woven into her appearance that beauty and power can't be separated. Either beauty follows power or power follows beauty. Trends change, and so do the methods used to achieve each society's version of what beautiful means. But that women in power generally need to emphasize wealth and youth remains consistent. Makeup is a way that women can portray the image they need to gain status, but its storied history makes the women who use it an easy target for men who claim those women are vain and shallow. This pattern happens time and time again. A beautiful woman gains power, then men turn her beauty against her once she loses that power. Until a woman can be valued for her personhood instead of appearance, this tug of war between beauty and power will remain.
That's great. I'm glad you picked that passage because I have a lot of questions that relate to things that you talked about in there. So I want to just like backtrack a little bit and just start off by asking, the book is so fascinating. Like I read most of it in just one day.
Awesome.
Because it was just so interesting. But you touch upon more than just beauty culture and feminism, which is what I expected. But also you get into pop culture, politics, history, gender presentation. It's not just about women, it's about men too, and all genders. What inspired you to write the book, and what did your research process look like? I know you mentioned that before we went live that the library was closed for most of that process. So how did you approach that?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in like appearance and fashion, and I changed my hair a million times, and I felt that there was a lot more research and a lot more people talking about clothing as a way to look at society and like historically, but I felt that there was kind of a hole around makeup. Like makeup is a part of that and is a part of people's appearance and how they portray themselves. And I just didn't see as much talk around that as I wanted. So it kind of opened it up for me to do that kind of, I don't know, investigation. My research process was a lot. As you talked about, we kind of talked about a lot of different things, a lot of different cultures. Part of what I wanted to do was show that historically makeup has always been there. People have always dealt with their image and portraying their image for other people. So the stereotypes and the problems that are around makeup have historically just been there. Like nothing that people are facing today is new, really, when it comes to makeup. So I looked at a lot of academic papers, a lot of historical sources, a lot of newspapers. I tried to get as close to the like, first person kind of historical sources I could. I reached out to a lot of academics who are doing that research on their own and talked to them about what they knew. I looked at images from people's time periods. You can look at paintings, you can look at photographs, you can look at just anything that kind of gives an idea of what people thought were beautiful at the time is helpful for kind of understanding more about that culture and time period. So yeah, like you mentioned, the library was closed for a lot of my research because I was doing writing the book, the second half of the book during the pandemic. I did a lot more ebooks than I ever imagined because that was like a way to get access to certain things that I couldn't get physical books at the time. I reached out and tried to talk to a lot of people who are doing their own research. So yeah, it was kind of like digging around and pulling together as many different sources as I could to find a better understanding of culture and time periods of the people I was looking at.
There's a lot of really interesting themes that keep reemerging throughout the book. I know you sorted it out more thematically than chronologically, but it keeps coming back to things like beauty as power or a status indicator, that ideal of whiteness, like all around the world. I mean, even in the reading, you talked about Cyrus makeup, you talked about women literally poisoning themselves to look whiter, and there's also that concept of purity, or at least the appearance of purity. Can you discuss a bit about the history surrounding those concepts and how you think, or if you think, we might be able to break free from some of these ideals in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think that the beauty industry itself kind of sprung up in the culture that created it, which was built on white supremacy, like a lot of people's governments, like a lot of cultures around the world, and especially with colonialism and the spread, the slave, like enslaving people, like that kind of emphasized whiteness as an ideal, as a way to reinforce status, and as a way to, keep white people in power at the top. Um, and that affects a lot of people in their everyday lives, even though you think that, oh, people, we're so far past that in society, but I really don't think that we are, because whiteness and beauty affects how people get jobs. It affects how people move through the world. And so it makes sense that you want to fit into beauty ideals if that affects your take home pay, if you're not getting tips because people don't think you're beautiful, if people don't trust you to, sell products to them or cut their hair because you don't fit into the beauty trends of the time. So I don't think people should really be necessarily faulted for doing something that may physically hurt their skin to try to fit into a beauty ideal. It's not the individual's fault for that, right? It's like kind of a larger problem of the beauty culture emphasizing whiteness and racism just being pervasive in the way people live their everyday lives. Part of, like, we talked about Queen Elizabeth a little bit. She wasn't married, and she was a queen in a culture where women were supposed to get married and they were supposed to be submissive to their husband. And so part of what she did to maintain her power was to continue to look like she wanted to get married. And so she continued to make up her face as if she were this virginal, young, beautiful woman who was looking for a husband. And the fact that she was a virgin was important at that time, because women, could be really condemned if they, had sex out of wedlock. So her image reinforced her beauty and youth and virginity, and she kept looking like she wanted to get married so that she could kind of keep up the charade of what women were supposed to be doing at that time. But then she never actually got married, because if she did, she would have had to share her power. So she kind of used her makeup to portray this image of this young, beautiful, powerful woman, and then she held on to that power in part by holding on to her beauty. So yeah, I think it's just a really interesting, I don't know, pervasive kind of belief in the beauty industry and in beauty culture. I do think that it does not have to stick around. Like, whiteness does not have to be the ideal form of beauty forevermore. It's a thing that people made up in the first place, because people bring their beliefs and their, judgments to makeup, and if those change, then makeup can change also. So no, I don't think we're locked into whiteness as a beauty ideal forever. I think that hopefully, the beauty industry right now is changing. There's more shades available for more people. There's more images can travel so quickly now that more images of beauty and are spreading faster than ever, and they're not just controlled by people at the top.
Like you were talking about, we have more brands and stuff like Fenty,
Mhm.
and MAC are more inclusive with their advertising images. They have more color options that I know that's still rare.
Mhm.
But at the same time, like you mentioned in the book, there's white celebrities like the Kardashians, especially, who sort of incorporate traditionally Black beauty ideals into their looks and are praised for it, where a Black woman who does that might be judged. Can we kind of talk about that a little bit, and the hypocrisy there?
Yeah, I think that a lot of beauty trends that kind of come out to be like, I don't know, a bigger cultural movement kind of start from subcultures. Like, you see something in a subculture, and then it becomes more popular, and then people kind of take that and twist it, and then the people at the top declare it as, this beauty ideal, even though it didn't come from them, it came from somebody else. And then they kind of shift it, make it more expensive, set different parameters around it so that people are locked out from that beauty ideal again, and they can maintain their status at the top. And like you said, you can see that with the Kardashians, who use, big full lips. And, Black women who have full lips are condemned for that. They're not getting modeling jobs because they're told their lips are too big. They're, harassed on the internet for posting photos of lips that emphasize, different lipstick colors on lips that are wider. So it just, I don't know, it just shows how I think these power structures work. And you can kind of see that clearly illustrated in makeup trends and where they came from and who is condemned for doing it and who is not. And it's the same makeup, right? Like if a white woman is wearing red lipstick and a black woman is wearing red lipstick, it's the same product, but they're received completely differently in a lot of society, and people bring different judgments to that.
Can we talk a little bit too about male uses of makeup? How does the public perception of men using cosmetics differ from women? And I know, like, and you mentioned this inside the book, but in the case of rock stars, it seems to be just like with the Kardashians being celebrities, it's more accepted to be like androgynous and more feminine than in regular day-to-day life. So can you talk a little bit about that, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think a lot of people who are performing and who use makeup as part of that performance, especially like you said, like male rock stars, um, they're not necessarily seen as less than or seen as someone who's transgressed. It's like the transgression is cool. It's like that's a cool thing. That's something to aspire to. It can be like exciting. And part of that is, I think, because their portrayal is kind of cushioned by their performance a little bit. Like if they wore the same makeup they wore on stage to the grocery store, it could be perceived a little differently. But when they're on stage and they're performing, it becomes this like exalted thing that isn't necessarily real life. So people find it more acceptable because it's like, oh, they're on stage, they're a rock star, so they can do this, it looks cool. And it's a little bit protected. They have a little bit of a cushion of celebrity, of wealth, of this image that they're trying to portray that people like understand a little bit better. But yeah, men who wear makeup in regular society, who are not wealthy, who are not a celebrity, who are not a rock star, face very different stereotypes and face different dangers than a superstar on stage might face. And that's not to say that someone performing in makeup or who's bucking gender stereotypes who is a performer doesn't receive harassment and doesn't receive danger, because they do. You can look at Lil Nas X, for example, or David Bowie, who received harassment and different threats and things like that. So they are facing similar things, but they also have wealth and celebrity to kind of protect them a little bit. So a man who's just going to work or going to the grocery store and wearing that same makeup could face very different things, very different judgments on their gender, their sexuality. They could be seen as deviant. And again, it's the same product. It just depends on who's wearing it and where they are and the context that people bring to that. I think that men wearing makeup is beginning to change. I know in Asian countries, men wearing makeup is a lot more accepted. It's just kind of seen as like regular grooming and skincare. And you also, put some, foundation on your face and you groom your eyebrows. And that's just part of like how you go about your day. Whereas in the US, that's still kind of seen as makeup. It's still kind of seen as feminine to do that. But I think that people are starting to bridge that gap a little bit, and men are starting to participate more in makeup and see that there are maybe benefits to grooming like that way, and that it can be fun and that it can be something they can participate in. So yeah, I think that conversation is starting to change, but it really depends on where you are and who you are and the different kind of judgments that you face when you go out in the world wearing makeup.
It seems like that's been historically always the case too. Like I know you mentioned, like back in the day, it wasn't unusual for men to wear makeup or like, have the powdered wigs and that sort of thing. So it's sort of like just a perpetual circle.
I think it totally, and I think that makeup trends kind of in general just swing back and forth on the pendulum. And so the stuff that's trendy now, or like a fully made up colorful face or a more natural bare face, like that cycles in and out of fashion. And the same is true for men and all genders participating in makeup. That cycles in and out of fashion. In some cultures and society historically, it was just normal and men wore makeup and men participated in that. And it was not even seen as a gender marker necessarily. It was just a thing that people maybe in a higher status did, or if you were playing a certain role in society, you did that. So yeah, I think it cycles kind of in and out. And I think again, with the modern beauty industry and kind of the globalization of, advertising images and the idea that makeup has been associated with women has really taken hold in the early 1900s in our culture. And it's been kind of hard to shift that view. But it's starting again to kind of swing back to where like more people of all genders can participate without the kind of stigma.
So if you have any questions for Rae, feel free, if you're on Facebook, put that in the comments. If you're here with us on Zoom, you can put it in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll try to get those answered for you. So early on in the book, you refer to the 2011 study at Boston University that found beauty has a significant positive effect on judgment of competence. And you went on to explain beautiful women are perceived as smarter and more capable, and women are judged more harshly than men when they fall short in attractiveness. This judgment on beauty can affect a woman's income along with her day-to-day experience of work. I was wondering if you could expand upon that a little bit, and maybe we can get into the concept of working girls around the world historically, because I know a big chunk of the book talks about that.
Yeah. So yeah, I think as a lot of women know, when they're moving throughout the world, if they are better groomed or considered more beautiful in their culture, they get kind of a better reception from people. And I think part of that judgment is assuming that they, are more together, that they know more about what's going on, that they're more capable, that they're just like better people in general because they fit into the society's version of what's beautiful. So at work, and a lot of what dressing professionally means is reinforcing ideas about gendered appearances. So for women, makeup can help them fit into what people believe women should look like, and that is beneficial for someone at work because they're seen again as more capable, as smarter. And that affects the jobs you get, the salary that you get, promotions that you get, just like the way people talk to you at work. It can affect really like, I don't know, like how you get money to feed your family. Like, I just feel like it's so important to understand that connection is there. And so, yeah, when women started entering the workplace, a lot of reaction to that was people being afraid that they would lose their femininity because they were entering a place that was previously dominated by men. So a way for women to kind of appear less threatening and be allowed into these spaces was to maintain their femininity. And makeup was a way to do that. So for a lot of cultures around the world, when women started entering workplaces where they were previously not allowed, makeup became a part of their image and a part of their way that they could say like, hey, I'm not trying to shake up gender roles here. I'm still going to be a woman. I'm still going to be beautiful. And you can tell that by the makeup that I'm putting on my face. So like you said, like a lot of these women, when they entered the workforce, became known as girls, as like shop girls, as office girls. And this kind of like feminization and like almost infantilization of women in these spaces, I think just like clearly indicates people's values. Like women are allowed in the workplace, but only if they stay beautiful and stay submissive and stay gentle. And women felt that they had to fit into this image to, get jobs, to get money, to be able to participate in society. So it created this like kind of cycle. I know in the US also in World War II, when women were filling in at factories and when women were filling in for men's positions who, had gone off to war, lipstick was a way to clearly show that they still cared about their appearance, that they were, still trying to be this idealized version of a woman. And you couldn't have long hair in a factory. You couldn't have flowy dresses in a factory because they were dangerous, but you could wear makeup. That was a safe way to literally say like, hey, I'm still a woman. I'm still pretty. Don't worry. And like, I'm here to do my job and still be beautiful. And that kind of affects people still where, grooming and makeup can help women appear to be more attractive and fit into their culture's ideals of beauty, which benefits them at work. But there's also a line where if you wear too much or if you're too, your makeup's too heavy or too dark or your lipstick's too bright, that kind of crosses a line into being maybe like a dumb blonde or being overly sexualized in the workplace. So it's a really difficult line for people to walk. As I'm sure many people know, like in regular life, it can be hard to know what to wear to work, what's acceptable for the office, versus, going out with your friends, and how that's different. And it just, I don't know, like if you wear red lipstick in one office, it might be fine. And in another, it might be too like racy and too much and too sexualized. So you just have to be really careful to walk that line of wearing makeup and reaping the benefits from it, but not going over the line.
Again, if you have any questions for Rae, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We do have one. You mentioned that culture and more affect makeup greatly, but has the government ever been involved in creating laws concerning makeup?
That's a really good question. And yes, the answer is yes. So depending on the government and depending on the time period, yeah, the government has absolutely gotten involved with makeup and with people's appearances. Top of mind comes to me is Korea. If you look at North Korea, there's rules about what makeup is acceptable for people to wear, and there's guards in a lot of like a college town that is there to kind of police people's appearances and report people that violate this like idealized version of what the government said that people should look like. So like hairstyles are included, lipstick colors are included in that. And so people are like quite literally, guided on what to wear by their government. Also, again, coming back to the US in during wartime, factories were allowed to continue making makeup because the government saw it as like a necessary morale booster for women to have that ability to beautify and for men to be able to look at beautiful women. Like it was literally, there were restrictions, there was rationing, there was restrictions on what you could buy and what you could make, but makeup was still allowed by the government to continue being produced. So yeah, the government has absolutely been involved in kind of shaping, I don't know, ideals and restricting people's freedoms through their appearance.
So you talk about how makeup in a lot of ways can be a double-edged sword. For instance, you mentioned in the book Cleopatra, and we've been talking about Queen Elizabeth, how they use makeup and beauty to their advantage, but it also easily can be used against them once they fall out of public favor. And similarly, you discussed how trans women are seen as a threat when they wear makeup. So in that case, it's considered a tool of deception, whereas a cis woman can use it for the same reasons in the same exact way without any judgment. Can we go into a little detail about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So again, makeup itself is just like a pigment. It's just a tool. It's just color that you put on your face. But depending on who's wearing it and who's looking at that person, they can face different judgments, different dangers. Yeah, like you said, trans women, makeup becomes a much more fraught experience than for a cis woman in the same, wearing the same makeup or in the same place. Trans women have also they've been penalized, like you said, for being considered deceptive for wearing makeup. People have accused them of trying to trick people into believing that they're a certain gender or something like that. And they face harassment and you can face real danger. People who are just out on the street who are trans wearing makeup face a much different reception and could face just, it just becomes more dangerous. Like literally your life could be in danger because of the judgments and prejudices that people bring to a trans woman wearing makeup than a cis woman at the same time. And like you said, people in power, when they fall out of power, it's very easy for people to say, look at their makeup, they're so vain, they're so silly, like they're not a serious leader, they're not important. But men also create images of power. Men also emphasize youth and money when they're in powerful positions. It's just that they don't necessarily use makeup as a way to do that, and women often have to. So it just becomes a thing that can be weaponized, which I guess is like any tool, right? Any tool that you use to create power or that you use to shape your life can be also turned into a weapon against you trying to do those same things. So I think that people who are outside of the dominant culture and people who are facing oppression in different ways face a much higher risk when using makeup, but they also may need to use that makeup to fit into certain places or to get by in certain places. So it becomes a much like riskier thing than like a cis white woman who could wear makeup or not, and they don't necessarily face any judgment for that.
So another question from participant, it's interesting when I travel to India, I notice many ads and billboards featuring light-skinned Indian women. Is this a byproduct of British colonialism? I tell my family and friends there to get out of this mentality, be proud and promote the Indian reality.
Yeah, I think it likely is a byproduct of colonialism and racism that has kind of spread around the world and has become really pervasive. I know that in India, there recently, I want to say in the 2010s, and I think it was a Miss India pageant. Everyone kind of had the same skin color and same skin tone and looked very similar. And it kind of caused a little bit of an uproar where people could clearly see, here's, you know, a picture of the 20 finalists or however many people there were, and they all have light skin color. And this is like clearly a beauty ideal that is pervasive in this area and that people maybe need to realize is happening and start to fight against. So yeah, I do think it is a byproduct of colonialism and racism that many cultures are facing, but I know is particularly, I don't know, sensitive, I think, in India right now and recently.
So you spend some time in the book getting into how appearance politics influences actual politics, and especially here in the US. I know you specifically mentioned Hillary Clinton, AOC, Justice Sotomayor as examples. How does beauty and beauty culture influence our perception of female politicians?
Yeah, so similar to how a person at work can be seen more competent when they are wearing makeup, politicians can be seen as like more competent if they are well groomed and wearing makeup. But politicians, just like dressing professionally, tend to reinforce gendered appearances. So a person who is seen as more acceptable in US politics is a woman who is promoting stereotypical feminine looks and stereotypical feminine like ideals, which is kind of why it's harder for someone like Hillary Clinton to be taken seriously than her male counterparts, because a woman in the workplace is seen, as we kind of talked about, as like transgressing that a little bit, like it's women in kind of a men's world. So it becomes a really difficult thing to balance embodying these feminine ideals, which may include, you know, makeup and beauty and your hairstyle a certain way, but also being competent, being a leader, being in the workplace, working long days, wearing pants, like things like that, that are seen as typically more activities for men. So I think women in politics have to balance their image in that way. And I know that women of color are penalized more for wearing loud makeup, for wearing red lipstick. Like you see AOC wear red lipstick, and a lot of people bring stereotypes to Latina women wearing red lipstick, that they're overly sexualized, you know, that they're not serious, that they're subversive in some way. And so she's kind of dealing with additional stereotypes than a white woman would in her position. And like I know Sotomayor and AOC were told, you know, not to wear bright red lipstick or nail polish when they were, you know, being confirmed, for instance. And so Justice Sotomayor, she didn't wear bright lipstick during her confirmation hearings, but she did once she was confirmed and once she was, you know, like secure in her position. And then she said, you know, hey, like this is who I am and this is what I want to wear, and that's fine. But it's a lot. There's a lot greater consequences for a woman of color in politics or in a position of power for deciding like what lipstick color to wear, for instance.
So we've talked a lot about makeup and how it upholds whiteness and white supremacy. In what ways, and I think it kind of plays into each other, does it sort of uphold capitalism as well?
Yeah, that's a It's a good question. So again, with the modern beauty industry, it kind of can't be separated from whiteness as a beauty ideal, and it can't really be separated from capitalism. Like people buy products as a way to participate in beauty culture. Like there's before, things were mass produced, a lot of people mix their own cosmetics. They, pass down recipes between family and friends. And now people generally buy it. You have to buy it to participate. And so even though like with the internet and with more people participating in beauty culture, still the people at the top are people that have access to those products who are able to buy, the newest things on the market and kind of show people how to use them. And so participating in beauty often becomes participating in capitalism. You shop to participate in beauty culture, you spend money on products, you show people how to do it, and it just kind of reinforces this cycle of buying what's new and what's next. And people with money are in a much easier position to participate and to be seen as like the people at the top of the pyramid, kind of because they have access to the newest, best products. Or designer makeup products are very expensive compared to drugstore products. So yeah, there is definitely still hierarchy. Participating in beauty often means participating in capitalism because you need to buy these products. You have to participate in some way in shopping. There's websites that spring up, communities around shopping and recommendations, and people shop together. So yeah, it's just often really inextricable from each other.
Mhm. So we have a question from Meredith, and she asks, in your research, did you encounter any stories about how society has leveraged makeup in the past outside of individual use, such as during war times?
So how has society leveraged makeup outside of wartime?
Yeah.
Let me think.
Oh, during war times.
During wartime. Okay, so we kind of talked about how in the US, especially around like World War II, makeup was considered, a good that still needed to be maintained, and it actually became kind of patriotic for women to wear red lipstick because it became seen as they were beautifying for the men overseas, and they were also in kind of defiance of Hitler himself, because Hitler was promoting, this Aryan ideal of a white woman with a bare face, and so women in the U.S. kind of saw it as their duty to defy that and to be beautiful for their own country and for their men who were fighting. And the U.S. government definitely promoted that and said, like, yeah, that's great. Like, we're going to keep these products available. Let's keep everyone happy and beautiful. And just kind of kept promoting these beauty ideals in the middle of a war, which you'd think like maybe lipstick isn't the most important thing in World War II. But clearly it was a priority for them. And it was a way to kind of, I don't know, keep people in line with what they thought women should be and what they thought men should be. So even though people were crossing these lines, makeup kind of kept people in their place a little bit. And so I think that having these gender roles benefits society in a lot of different ways. It doesn't necessarily benefit individuals. So people in power and governments benefit from upholding those structures and keeping them in place.
So I just wanted to give a quick content warning for the next question. It might be triggering for certain people, but I wanted to spend a moment and touch upon the perception of beauty and makeup and how it influences court outcomes, as you wrote about. So it was both women on trial, but also when women are defendants in rape or assault cases. You wrote, in a rape trial, women often must prove they made it clear that they didn't consent by proving their goodness and niceness. Often portraying sexual purity is key in this process. And later you added that wearing makeup has no effect on whether a woman will be assaulted, but it does have an effect on whether that woman will see justice in the courtroom. So I was wondering if we can talk a little bit about that and kind of the hypocrisy behind that.
Yeah, it's brutal out there. So yeah, I think that we kind of talked a little bit about how makeup can be seen as overly sexual when some women wear it, like red lipstick for example, or like heavy eye makeup. things that women would wear on a date or on a night out are seen as maybe transgressive and overly sexualized if that same makeup is worn in a courtroom. And that can be especially important for women on trial, especially for rape cases, when so much of the result in court comes down to whether people believe this woman and whether they think that she was innocent enough to, have told someone no, that they didn't want to have sex. And so all of this is kind of tied up into a woman's appearance and what she looks like, which depends on the makeup that she wears. So women, I mean, I think a lot of women intuitively know this when they go about their day just in the world. But it's much heightened in a courtroom scenario, where you may need to portray that you are innocent, that you're not sexual, that you're virginal, like we talked about. And that can have a result on if people believe you and believe your story, and the way a jury might vote an outcome. Women in, you know, there's an example of a woman in the 1920s in Chicago who was accused of murdering her husband. And she didn't wear makeup. She was an Italian immigrant. She didn't fit into the beauty culture at the time. And it was very easy for people to bring racist beliefs to her and her image and say, like, oh, yeah, she's definitely a murderer. Like, she doesn't speak English. She's not beautiful. And all these like horrible judgments were brought to this woman who, in all likelihood, did not kill her husband, was completely innocent, just got kind of swept up in this courtroom scenario. And part of her process, she got a new lawyer who was a woman who kind of understood the dynamics of play. And they gave her a makeover. Her name was Sabella Nitti, and they helped dye her hair. They gave her makeup. They kind of made her more fit into the idealized version of a white woman at the time. And in doing so, people began to see her as a more respectable woman. So then eventually her case was dropped. Like, it got pushed back and dropped. And part of that was because of a change in public perception around her. So I think that, yeah, respectability and sexualization has a lot of tie into the makeup that people wear, and that has a huge effect on women in court, whether they're, the defendant or the accused or whatever. It just really, really is a place that kind of heightens all of that awareness, I think.
Okay, if you have any questions for Rae, feel free to drop those in. I actually have my last question for you. We really can't be talking about makeup and beauty culture nowadays without discussing social media a little bit. You described Instagram in your book as a new way to exist for all genders, not just women. Can we talk a little bit about how social media is changing the way that we look at gender and beauty and appearance politics in general?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think the internet and Instagram and different ways that people share their own images that they're in control of has been a really, really great kind of new reimagining of beauty culture. Anyone can participate if they have the internet and are able to like put their image on the internet. So people can explore different gender presentations, people can explore different makeup looks in a safe place in their home where they don't even have to go outside to see people necessarily. All the interaction takes place online where you're physically protected a little bit. So not to say that there's not harassment online, because there is, and that can be dangerous, but you don't have to necessarily go out and see another person face to face to participate in these beauty trends. So it kind of opens up space for a lot more play and a lot more people to be able to participate and find like-minded people and share different ideas. And so you see just a lot of creativity and a lot of makeup looks that may not be acceptable in at work or at school, but you can just have fun playing around in your home and uploading this image. So it could be like completely, I don't know, the colors people use are crazy, the designs people use are really interesting. Like, it's just a wild place to play with your image, that may and find that community, because it's on the internet where you can share all these images really quickly. You can find people from all over, and so it just becomes this new way for people to play with their image and play with makeup in a way that everyone could not have participated before the internet made that possible.
So we have one question left from the audience. It says, I feel like makeup can be such a fun tool of expression, but it's artificially constrained by trying to anticipate the meaning and context of each choice, do you see a pathway out of this kind of fraught relationship with makeup? And I mean, I feel like this relates to what you were saying just now about social media as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that having a safe space to kind of play with makeup and what decide what you actually like versus what culture maybe makes you think you should like, is definitely a way to begin to see those differences and see what people are doing for themselves versus what they're doing to put on a public face for others. I think the pandemic itself, when people were working from home a lot more often and not really going out into public, has made people reevaluate their appearance and what they do for themselves versus what they do for other people. So yeah, I think we're starting to kind of understand that relationship more and understand more deeply what we do for ourselves versus for going out in public. But I also think you can't really separate. As soon as you go out in public, people see you and people bring judgments to you and people kind of bring their cultural understanding of beauty to their, day-to-day life. So I don't know that it's possible to completely separate those two when you're interacting with other people. But I do think that you can kind of understand the difference more. People can kind of push those boundaries a little bit more in a safer way that more people can participate and change those beauty ideals and change these ideas about stereotypes. I also think that you can put on makeup for yourself. You can put on red lipstick because it makes you feel good. But as soon as you go out into the world, you're either getting benefits or seeing things that are detrimental. Like, your decision to do that doesn't affect necessarily the results you get. Like, you could wear makeup because it makes you feel good and then you also receive benefits for wearing makeup, or you could wear makeup because you like it and it's fun and then you also could be judged for that experience. So I think that it's hard to separate. Even if you do something for yourself, the world still comes into play when you go out into the world. So it's kind of, I don't know that it can be totally separated entirely.
So hard. It's like,
I know, it is hard, and that's the like, yeah, I mean, makeup, it's I keep talking about power and how it, like, reinforces power structures and how people who are outside of those power structures can use makeup to get into them or fit into them or survive in a world that wasn't made for them. But that's because I really believe it. Like, it really affects how people move day to day, and it brings all these stereotypes and ideas and beliefs are tied up into it. And I think that if you're not examining it, you're just kind of perpetuating the same systems that exist today.
it's so strange how the pandemic kind of brings stuff into focus too. Like I've
Yeah.
I've always liked makeup, but I've never been like a huge like, oh, I have to wear makeup every single
Hmm.
day type of person. But I know when we were under shelter in place orders and I was working from home, like at a certain point, I had to put makeup on. Like I just felt so, I just felt like so blah and gross and
Yeah.
kind of sad. And I missed interacting with people, but putting makeup on made me feel like, okay, well, now I can be more productive and no one's gonna see me, but I feel better. Like, and it's so odd.
Yeah.
I never thought that I would like need makeup to feel good, but it actually, it's strange. It's like an individual, like idiosyncratic thing. But now I
Yeah.
wear it more often just because it made me feel good during quarantine. So it's
Yeah.
odd.
And I think for a lot of people, they kind of did reevaluate their relationship to makeup and kind of understood more deeply why they were wearing it and the effect that people had. But you kind of talk about makeup as like putting on your face, right? Like, that's like a
Mhm.
saying. But yeah, if you want to switch from modes of home to work and you're in the same place, a way to do that is to put makeup on. It's to say, like, hey, I'm putting on a face to face my day. I'm going to put myself together to do these things I need to do. And it is a way of just like taking control, of shifting your mindset, of doing things that, kind of set you up for your day that you didn't necessarily expect would, because you're in a totally different environment now in quarantine with a pandemic, and makeup became a different, people I think formed a different relationship maybe to their appearance than they did before.
We have another question from the audience. Dean asks, my ex-wife never wore makeup. She's white. I always respected her and loved her for being fully who she was. She had power in the workplace without makeup. Is this way out of being normal?
I I think that is normal. For a lot of women, especially a white woman, like we kind of talked about, has greater freedom to make different decisions about her appearance without being judged the same way as maybe a woman of color in the same position. Um, it also, a lot of people may fit into beauty ideals without wearing obvious makeup, or maybe, you know, the culture of where they're working at the time kind of sees visible makeup as like a silly, frivolous thing. So I think a lot of it comes down to people's individual workplaces, or kind of who they're seeing and interacting with, what makes the most sense for people in the workplace. Some people don't want to wear makeup, and that is beneficial in the work that they're doing. Some people do want to wear makeup, and that could benefit them greater in the work that they're doing. And each woman kind of has to understand the cost and the risk of those decisions. People who don't wear makeup at work may face an uphill battle when they're talking to people, to be taken seriously, or to be um, you know, viewed as the same way, who someone is more, I don't know, more femininely or traditionally beautiful. But the opposite could be true depending on your workplace. Like visible makeup could be seen as frivolous or silly or too sexual. So yeah, I think not only are you dealing with a culture at large, but you're dealing with the office culture of specific workplaces. Um, for example, if people are working in academia, they may not be seen as someone serious if they're wearing bright and visible makeup. That is just one example of like something that where someone could think, oh, they're not, you know, they're just silly because they're spending more time on their appearance than, you know, the books they should be reading or something like that. So yeah, you're dealing with a lot of different cultures at play when you decide, you know, should I be wearing makeup or not in this environment, and what kind of benefits and what kind of harm am I going to see by making these decisions.
So we're nearing the end of the hour. Thank you so much, Rae. This has been terrific. I really enjoyed reading your book.
Thank
And
you.
again, the book is called All Made Up. It's available here at the library. And if you can't get it at the library, I do suggest purchasing it for yourself. Today's book sandwiched in was made possible by gifts to the New Haven Free Public Library Foundation. If you enjoyed our program, please consider making a donation at nhfpl.org/donate to help support our collections, programs, and services throughout the year. And please, you'll see a survey at the end if you're on Zoom. Please fill that out. We take all the comments very seriously, and we try to get you more of what you like to see based on responses to that survey. Please join us again next week. My colleague Isaac Shub will be chatting with Michael Bernez about his book For Might and Right, Cold War Defense Spending and Remaking of American Democracy, in a discussion co-sponsored by our friends at the New Haven Peace Commission. Information about that and all of our upcoming talks and events is available on our website calendar at nhfpl.org. And again, Rae, this has been fantastic. I'm so glad that you were able to join us, and thank you so much for this book. It's really something great.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time, and I'm so glad people are interested.